For a country that's the world's sixth largest economy, it's a tragedy that almost 13 million people live in poverty. That's 1 in 5 people who live below our official poverty line. This means that these people experience life as a daily struggle. Estimates suggest that over 2,300 people sleep rough on any one night in places like this. However, actual figures are likely to be much higher. This year, the IFS predicts the number of children in absolute poverty will rise by 600,000 to peak at 3.1 million, along with 2.5 million working-age parents and 4 million working-age adults without children. For the first time in many years, the UK will also see a rise in the number of homeless people in the country. Reasons range from job loss, drug addiction, alcohol abuse and family breakdowns. I'm here at Lincoln's Inn in central London, where a group of volunteers will be handing out food and warm clothing. This is one of many initiatives taking place all over the UK, and today more than 100 homeless people are expected to come here.
There's so many homeless people in London which people don't realise, and I think it's about raising an awareness of the issue of homelessness. How there's so many people in London that are homeless.
We feed I'd say about 200 homeless every weekend.
Is there a lot of discrimination against vulnerable people like you?
Yes, there is, definitely. There is, especially against the English, I think. Because there is so many foreigners coming to these handouts, there is discrimination, and I think there's a lot of discrimination with the government as well. This is why I believe they don't do anything for the homeless, as though they're not bothered.
On average, a homeless person dies at the age of just 47. That's little more than some of the poorest countries in the world. Compared to non-homeless, the homeless are 9 times more likely to commit suicide and 13 times more likely to be the victims of violence.
There is no government there for people. They'd rather see people in the gutter. They'd rather people just like dying or end up in an institute or mental institute.
Can you tell me how you arrived at this current position in your life?
Well, I was a social services manager and it broke down very quickly. I had which I now recognise, I had a mental breakdown, although it wasn't diagnosed by psychiatric services. But I fully was well. I had a beautiful house, 2 very beautiful children, beautiful wife. The next minute I'm actually in a cemetery in a sleeping bag, so it was really quite traumatic. I couldn't even look people in the eye for months, and then I got some help.
I'm not putting on that. Someone gave me this coat. I'm 51. People think I look well. I feel sorry for all these people that become homeless because everyone's got a story, and the government should start getting organisations and people getting together. They've got money and making accommodation to help people.
Every man, woman and child on the planet has a right to eat, so I don't care where they're from in the world.
Today has been a real eye-opener. Many of those I've spoken to are intelligent, bright individuals who've had hopes, ambitions, aspirations, just like the rest of us. But for many reasons, different reasons, their lives haven't quite worked out the way they'd planned. Gatherings like these are amazing because not only do they provide a hot meal for the day, but they also allow the people who come here to integrate and socialise with others. Homeless people are some of the most vulnerable people in our society. Whose responsibility is it to address the problems of poverty in the UK? What role does the government need to play? Is it the responsibility of us individuals? As you can see, poverty is not just an issue that affects developing nations, but is very much alive in the UK too. It's a universal concern. The welfare system in the UK, despite recent cuts and freezes to social security expenditure, offers support to those in need. However, many still fall through the cracks in the system. Whether local or global, human development is in crisis as many struggle to survive around the world. But why is this? Have these people not done enough to get themselves out of this predicament? Or have they made poor decisions and are solely responsible for their own plight? Are they to blame for this situation? Should we care about poverty as people living in the West, and if so, why?
I've travelled around the world and I've seen Oxfam's work in Asia and Africa and Latin America. And what we see is people trying to work their way out of poverty, but the rules that govern the world are not fair, and the economics that run the world are not fair. What we've seen since 1990, we've seen a massive increase in inequality between rich and poor. We've seen people pushed off their land, and we've seen a financial system that's gone completely out of control and caused the crash. And yet even after that crash, those at the very top continue to get even richer. So it isn't the fault of people in poverty. It's a problem with the way that we run our world. And there is an alternative, which is to put people first and to say that everyone has dignity, everyone is special, and everyone should be able to have a job, to go to school, to have healthcare. These things are possible, and that's what we work for.
Women and girls are most often oppressed by poverty. Their needs and rights must be central to eliminating poverty. What are your thoughts on this?
Wherever we see poverty, that poverty may be crushing the lives of men and of boys, but always we see that women and girls are at the sharpest end of things. So however bad things are for men and boys, they're always worse for women and girls. But it isn't just about saying we need to help women and girls. It's also about recognising the power of girls and of women as agents of change themselves. So in Oxfam's work, when we say women are at the heart of what we do, it doesn't just mean that we help women. It means that we support the empowerment of women so that women can challenge unfair rules and practices, and also so that women can help to get themselves out of poverty and to be a real asset to their community. So it's not just about saying things are tough for women and girls, but also that women and girls are in fact the answer to that question.
Does aid work? Is it worthwhile?
It does, and I've seen for myself. I've met kids who are alive and in school because of aid. I've met women who've been able to escape violence or oppression because of aid. I've met farmers who've been able to grow their way out of poverty because of aid. It does work. Lives really do change. You know, 120 million kids used to not be in school, and now that's down to about 65 million. 12 million kids used to die every year before the age of 5, and now that's down to about 6 or 7 million. So real progress because of aid. It really does make a difference. So when people give, they can feel really proud that they're saving a life.
There are many aspects to poverty and many challenges that need to be addressed and solutions found. But with whom does this particular burden of obligation lie?
There's always going to be an inherent level of poverty anyway, that's simple economics, but I think it's hard to completely eradicate it, but it's ultimately lies with responsibility of governments.
Government. The government, really. It must be the government, mustn't it? You know, I blame the government, you know, all governments, you know. Thatcher's government, Blair's government, right back, you know.
And I think the government's supposed to be interfering in other countries and trying to, you know, focus in this country more or less. You know, trying to find jobs, trying to find resources.
The general consensus seems to be that the responsibility lies with the state. Let's get a response from a member of our ruling coalition government, Liberal Democrat MP Sarah Tether, to see if our leaders are doing enough to help those in need. What would you say are the main barriers and obstacles that keep people in poverty?
Well, I think one of the things that often keeps people in poverty is the fact that it gets passed from one generation to another. So the greatest predictor of how well you'll do at school, I'm afraid, is your parents' income. So that's the reason why this government, the coalition government's been focusing on trying to help young people who come from poorer backgrounds do much better at school.
With the recent implementation of cuts to benefits and services, how's the government planning to help those in poverty?
Well, I'm quite concerned, actually, about some of the cuts to benefits. Certainly for some of my constituents, that's going to be very difficult. But the government is doing some things that will make a real difference. And one of the things that I did when I was a minister was to introduce free nursery care for children from poorer backgrounds from the age of 2. And we extended the number of hours you could get if your child's 3 and 4, from 12.5 hours a week to 15. But we've introduced this new help for those whose children are much younger. And that, I think, will make a big difference both to their education and also in terms of encouraging people to go back to work, which will help with family budget.
The government has put a ring fence around international aid. How do you intend to help developing nations whilst dealing with our own economic challenges?
I think some people think that it's an either-or, supporting other poorer countries versus supporting our own country. And I think you've got to do both. It's really important we do both for moral reasons, that we should care about people not just in our own country, but also it's good for us. It's good for us if other countries are safer, if they're prospering. It's better for us in terms of trading with them. They're less likely to need to flee their own country if their country's doing well. So I think people people in Britain, first of all, they should support international aid because it's the right thing to do, but they should also support it because it's good for us, it's good for Brits.
We tend to think that eradicating poverty is impossible, but the actual cost of eradicating poverty is just 1% of the global income. That's just 1 pence in every pound. Us living without that penny means that millions of others can live. Financial institutes have a role to play, and governments have a huge responsibility in tackling poverty, and individuals can play their part too. What are the ways forward in tackling poverty?
You know, more important than people's money is their voice. And everyone can go and visit their MP or email their MP, or if you haven't got time to email your MP, you can tweet or Facebook your MP and say to them, this stuff really matters to me, because leaders listen to what the voters say.
Well, thinking of ways to address global poverty can be a very daunting task indeed. I think it's very helpful to try to think of concrete problems for which there may be specific solutions, such as getting one extra child to go to school or providing one farmer with fertilisers. And moreover, in so doing, one should aim to support those programmes that are both well implemented and which have been shown to be effective.
So people who live in the UK, people who live in their own country would be best off addressing poverty in their own country because they can actually go out and help poor people directly, rather than having to send money abroad or pay to a charity. One thing also people can do is try to encourage to lower migration barriers. So we can talk about encouraging more migrants to come from developing countries to developed countries and earn money, earn skills, take that back home, and improve their livelihoods of their own home countries. Now, of course, a lot of people might respond by saying that allowing migrants to come into our own country might take jobs away from us. In fact, there's a lot of evidence to suggest that's not really true.
They'll find there are local charities, some run out of local voluntary groups, some run out of mosques or churches or organisations helping the elderly. But you can give money, you can volunteer your time to work in a soup kitchen or to advise people. There's lots of ways in which individuals can get involved.
In simple terms, poverty is caused by political and economic influences and inequities, and not unless the current rules set by wealthy companies and nations determining corporate globalisation and how our societies are governed are re-evaluated, the cycle of poverty will continue, preventing communities and countries from fully realising their potential. Nations develop at different rates, and for those still in the process of development, global help is needed towards their future advancement. It's unimaginable that in the 21st century, almost half the population of the planet is struggling to put food on the table. While governments need to take the lead, we can all play a part too and help actively make a difference to the world in which we live.